Happy London Climate Week to those who celebrate. You're listening to Wicked Problems. I'm Richard Delavan, here at the Excel, having started the week at the Groucho Club for a slightly more intimate gathering of the Climate Impact Summit set up by Stephen Murphy. We're now here in the heart of London Climate Week's biggest flagship event.
Just seeing the amount of companies that are here now, how many startups and scale-ups are here. There have been people dropping ticket sizes all day. I think the climate tech sector looks really good if this is a sort of representation of this.
94% plus of our revenues coming from the business and transaction layer, not regulatory compliance. So we redefine the category by not being used as a compliance tool, but as a business tool. That takes a lot of learning, a lot of understanding of solving real human problems for our customers.
Full of energy. I think people are really anticipating the election coming.
Is this policy going to improve? I think that's an incredibly low bar for us to handle.
You're thinking about going to the US?
No, so I'm actually a naturalized British citizen, so I'm stuck here for now. I think the UK is good. You get access to immense talent.
Those are just some of the voices that we captured here at the Excel, including Duncan Reid, who you heard on the show last week, who's the CEO and founder of Reset Connect, the big flagship event. Sarah McIntosh, the CEO of CleanTech UK. Motaz Darum, who's a co-founder of a company that we met, asking some interesting questions. And we'll come back to those voices and more, as well as a conversation with Peter Sainsbury of Carbon Risk. But first, we're going to bring you my interview with climate risk analytics startup, ClimateX, which has just raised an $18 million round from, amongst others, Google Ventures. Lucky Ahmed, CEO of ClimateX. Big day for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Super excited to finally get the news out. It's been a couple of months of keeping quiet and keeping the lid on something that kind of leaked, but didn't quite fully leak a few months ago.
Well, so just to explain to our listeners, in terms of the space that you guys are in, we've covered it a bit. We've covered it in the context of talking to a peer company of yours, Vita, out of Munich, and talking to some other folks in the space. But tell us very briefly what it is that ClimateX does.
I would almost take a step back, because one of the things that we really, really see that people focus in on, anything to do with climate, in fact, but particularly in the physical risk space where we operate, is fires and storms and floods, and how do you quantify those things? And people get sucked into that narrative quite quickly, and understandably so. For us, it's a conduit to driving value for our customers and for the businesses that use our services in two ways. And it's really the two ways that our customers care about, is how do we help them make more money and grow their top line and drive new revenue opportunities into their business, but also how do we help them to implement our solutions in ways that drive cost saves to them as well. And alongside that, one of the consequences that happens is that, for those customers that use our services, they find themselves being able to outcompete their peers, for example, on transactions. So it helps them with market share and providing better service to their clients. So for me, number one is we're an enablement tool for business growth. And we do that through this novel set of technologies around pricing and understanding climate-related risks and what that means for the businesses that we sell to, but also the clients, typically they're B2B enterprise type sales that we do. So that, I think, is number one. Number two, in terms of the context of what we do, we're a pure SaaS-based company. So we're not a consulting shop. We help our customers to really think about the pricing impacts to balance sheet and P&L of climate change from assets and specific properties, but also at the corporate level. And when you combine those two things, it means that we can really help, predominantly in our case, financial institutions, so banks, asset managers, and insurers, to start to integrate this essential component of climate risk through this new lens into the day-to-day business that they operate in. So that's what I would say that we do and what we focus on. One is enabling our clients to grow sustainably their businesses, and two, we enable that through physical risk and pricing assessments, balance sheet P&L for our customers.
You guys are very focused on the financial sector. Talking to some other folks in the space, they're talking to people in the public sector, they're talking to governments, they're talking to others. Are you guys going to stay in the financial services lane?
Yeah, look, my background, just for those who haven't had the story before, looked into it, and similar for my co-founder, is we came from the world of banking, working in highly regulated environments. And so it's not a novel task or something you can do on the side of your desk to get a bank to integrate climate risk into pricing and originations and decision making. Actually, interestingly, 94% plus of our revenues coming from the business and transaction layer, not regulatory compliance. So we've redefined the category by not being used as a compliance tool, but as a business tool. So that takes a lot of learning, a lot of understanding of solving real human problems for our customers, so deep customer empathy. And as you can imagine, these are sophisticated buyers. Once you plug this data in to a scorecard or into a capital model, that's affecting them across millions of transactions each year and decisions that they make, but also the health of their balance sheet and their book as a whole. So we are really want to become specialists and domain experts in a place where we have the deepest empathy and awareness of what our customers need. And that's within these regulated markets of financial services. That's also where we believe that the use case can scale its impacts, because once our customers in these particular markets adopt our data, they can help their clients, being corporates, for example, to start to think about climate risk in different ways and to start adapting to that new future by financing some of those changes that's required. That capital deployment is essential. As to governments, as to other types of corporates and other industries, in the future, potentially it's something that we can look at. We never say never, but we don't want to go 1 mile wide and 1 inch deep. We want to really be focused and really good at what we do in the place that we know it best.
So just break it down really, really simply. So just give an example of how one of your customers' clients are using the tool, using the data that you're compiling. Actually, let me take a step back from that. Where are you getting all this data to calculate levels of physical asset risk from climate?
Yeah, it's a good point to mention. Have a think about, I guess, what we do is more than just the physical risk problem. We're solving challenges across the workflow of our customers, right? So we didn't look at climate change as just, we need to give you a risk rating or an index and that's the end of your problem. There are things you need to do before, alongside, and after in order to complete the job and the task, right? So that's important. We look at this more as a workflow where the pipe is leaking at different places. Now, some of those solutions require a lot of data and others are more process driven and ways that we calculate and synthesize data. So there's different things at play here. Now, when it comes to the data itself, when we talk about digital twin, and you might have heard of this concept before, what we're doing is, the reason why we invested millions of dollars in R&D has been to build our own digital twin, but really across 3 different layers. So the first layer is really looking at the physical characteristics of the land. So, the channel geometry, vegetation, topography, and all of these things. So we've built our own physically realistic representation of the Earth's surface and terrain and other characteristics. That's a combination of remote sensing data. There's great information that you can get through satellites these days of all sorts and descriptions from public and private sources that we pull together. We bias correct. We do a lot of work on our side to make sure that data is usable. And then through that data, we can also fill in gaps. So we've developed our own models that will start to compute some of the data challenges that we've got and to fill them up with something that seems to make more sense. And then we test and validate to have confidence in it. So imagine that's my layer 1, is the physical characteristics. Now, the thing that we want to do then is think about, well, actually, how do you turn these physical risks, so floods and fires and storms, into asset or property specific risks, or even P&L risks? So what happens if a business is disrupted? How do we think about the impacts from a revenue point of view? To do that, there's 2 things we need to do. One is we've also implemented a layer of infrastructure data. So we've mapped out now 44 million miles. So it's just under 80 million kilometers worth of road, rail, power grid infrastructure around the world. So think of that as the next layer in the sandwich, right? So now, if there's flooding and it intercepts across one of these critical infrastructure, something that a road that leads to a key distribution center, we can see what those impacts look like and what the disruption might be. Now, That's good from a distribution and a disruption point of view, but actually the holy grail then is a third layer of the cake, which is the buildings and assets data. So we have now a database of 1.5 billion assets around the world across all those geographies that we cover: Europe, North America's, APAC. So this is 83% of the global economy that we cover, and probably 90-95% of all of our customer exposures. What that means through that data set that we've compiled is that our customers don't need to work out the financial translation themselves. For example, Virgin Money is one of our customers. They have 300,000, 400,000 odd mortgages. They don't know what each of those buildings are made of. They just don't have that information. We do. And so that means that we can then compute the asset-specific vulnerability curves and the damage functions and give you the financial impacts when it comes to replacement costs for those buildings. Those models that we've produced to get those data sets and complete that view of the world, they're not perfect, as any model is not perfect, But one of the things that we've done is create the infrastructure that allows our customers to override those assumptions around the building characteristics and to customize those inputs. And then we'll recalculate the loss functions with those assumptions, which means that our customers can get really high precision outputs from the models as well. And that's really important because that then reinforces our models so that the more customers use our data, the better the quality of the underlying data set becomes. And so everybody benefits in the ecosystem as we mutualize the data as properties trade hands, for example. So it's incredibly powerful that we've got those nodes and those databases pulled together through a lot of the R&D that we've been doing over the last 2 and 3 years to solve those problems, which is beyond the how do you take a climate model and translate that into a flood event to other things that really are pain points for our customers. So, and all of this is overlaid and surrounded by incredibly robust and defensible governance around everything that we do. And that's important because when our customers in the financial services world want to take this type of data and use it inside of their models, they need to get through audit. They need to have confidence in what they're dealing with and to get that through regulatory scrutiny. And because we used to build these models in financial services, we used to audit these models, we used to calibrate them, we know exactly how they work and we know what the standards look like of governance, documentation, validation, limitations, etc. And so we've implemented that, even though we don't have to, into the way that we work as a company. So that builds confidence with our customers as well.
I think at one point, I think in your release talked about 500 trillion data points that you're managing in order to be able to kind of do that. So I suppose, yeah, it does raise questions about can any system be good enough to be able to kind of manage that amount of data sufficiently robustly that they can pass the kind of audit test when it comes to a financial services client. But it sounds like from the names that you've got on your ledger so far that you can tell us, it sounds pretty good. And Google Ventures obviously decided to believe it. But let me just take a step back. In terms of the adaptation space, because I realize we're running out of time, it's such a huge thing. But I suppose many people wonder, why is it a private sector problem? How is the private sector going to play this as opposed to just public sector? We did a story about this a couple months ago where my headline was what's the IRR of a seawall? Because it's kind of a weird question to ask. And that's kind of why I wonder if maybe that's why the private sector has been hesitant to get involved, but you guys really hit the right space at the right time because now the conversation's here.
Yeah, and it's actually a really good point. And that was one of the things around how do you close that value loop, for the customers. And when you talk about revenue generation and so on, what does that look like? So, if you all you're doing is giving someone a risk rating and saying that this place where I've never put those goggles on that tell me what the risk looks like of this building, there's now suddenly a high risk of something that might happen in the future, but hey, it may also not happen because we don't know. A lot of our investment, so real estate investor type customers, asset managers, and even banks are saying, look, all the other conditions are there. This investment looks good. Am I really going to back out because there's a potential flood risk? And for the banks, it was a case of this is just really bad for me. Like it's just making the risk profile look worse. So how do you turn that into an opportunity and really enable the front line? And so one of the things that we developed and we actually released a month ago or so was Adapt. And the point of Adapt was to bring this full circle and say, look, these buildings are not bad buildings. Actually, if you're to invest in protecting those assets, because you can install localized flood defenses, you can fortify foundations, you can change the roof tiles. So there are things that you can do to protect the asset. You'll improve its risk profile over time. You'll make it more attractive to tenants if you're leasing that property. You'll protect and improve the resiliency overall. But if you're a bank, guess what? You can fund that work as well, right? And so we calculate what those CapEx requirements will typically look like. We also deliver an ROI against that. So you'll see your payback period. And then it's a smarter, more pragmatic decision that our investors can make in terms of, do I proceed, yes or no? And if I'm the bank and I'm the front line, this is great. We're doing all this transition finance. Let's talk about adaptation finance as well. And so bring that to the table because that's what the clients want. That's what your occupiers want. And that builds resiliency. It's a win-win-win. So we've taken this out of the domain of pure risk and downside to actually you can genuinely grow your top line revenues by implementing Adapt. And then if you want to go even more specialist, there's ways to do that too.
Well, I think one last question before we let you go. Lucky, I'm sure you're very busy today. So 18 million is a nice, good chunk for an A. So congratulations on getting the ticket size, but also like what's the use of funds? What are you going to be doing with this stuff? What's next for you guys?
Yeah, I think look, the first thing that we need to do is we have to make sure we are shipping products that our customers love and that they find value in, right? So we have things that our customers we know will solve real pain points for them that we want to deliver to them throughout the rest of this year and into next, right? So this is number one, is let's deliver great products for our customers that solve genuine problems that they have in this space, and continue to innovate. Like, we have to continue innovating in this nascent market that's continued to evolve. So we're going to stay ahead of the curve with that. So R&D will continue as a core thesis for the company. Second, and I think principally, we're in a place where the demand that we are seeing coming into the business, we're not able to service with existing headcount. Like, we just can't. And we're onboarding increasingly more and more global customers. So we need to make sure that we've got the capacity to service that demand and to support our customers and make sure they continue to get great world-class service, regardless of which time zone they operate in, right? So it's critical that we build those functions to support not just the customer demand inbound, but also the customers that we've onboarded, and make sure that they continue to have a voice at the table, and we support them with all that we can. The third one, which is really important to us, and one of the big reasons actually why we were with GV in the end, was the US expansion, right? So right now, the whole team, we're an office-first company, is based here in London. So I will be moving to New York next week, actually, as it happens, to start setting up physical presence in the US. We have US-based and headquartered customers with hundreds of millions, or billions, in AUM. We need to make sure that we are on the ground to support them, but also to understand more about the market as we expand our footprint outside of the UK. So I will be out there to start establishing the team and to start working with our customers, and then let's see how that goes. But that international expansion to support beyond the UK shores is a critical part of our strategy for next year.
Well, I wish you luck in my hometown. I hope it goes well for you guys. And congratulations again on today's news. And we look forward to hopefully getting yourself and your co-founder back on at some point in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, and thanks for raising this topic to the audience, because it's an incredibly important one. So I'm glad that it's getting the coverage that it deserves.
That was Lucky Ahmed there of ClimateX. Later, we'll bring you back a conversation with Peter Sainsbury, the founder of Carbon Risk, talking about whether political risk is priced in fully at the moment in terms of the ways the markets are looking at renewables, clean tech, carbon price, ETSs, and more. But first, let's get some more voices from here at the Excel.
Would you advise companies to go to the US? I think we'll have some diversity of view on this one. Who wants to go first?
I don't quite believe that the US is the land of the money that it's made out to be. You step off the plane and everyone throws money at you with huge valuation, but it's great. You should all go. It's like going to London and the streets are paved with gold. I think a good company is a good company, and a good business is a good business, and your idea is good anywhere in the world. There may be reasons to go to the US, but that's because there's a specific reason to go. There may be a client that you can work with, or a specific problem that needs answering, and that would be a reason to go to the US, not just because it's going to be so much easier. So I don't think that's the case.
I think from my perspective, it's very hard to encourage that, given BGF is set up to invest and back British business. Outside of that, I do think that the UK has an incredibly exciting ecosystem. Again, comparing what Eamon just mentioned, I think the move in here, it's often easy to look at the US as sort of greener pastures, but I think the reality is there are several challenges over there, not least their impending elections as well. I think grass definitely isn't always greener. If there's a specific reason for moving, there's lots of, more prevalent press around people like Bolt and others who have been courted to take gigafactories, etc. over there. And if it makes financial sense, great, because there's a specific project being backed. So a generic move to the US because it's greener, I would advise against that.
Yeah, I was going to mention the Trump dynamic as well, but I think, reasons you might think about moving to the US is A, the size of the market, and B, the current incentive scheme through the Inflation Reduction Act. I think, we don't know what's going to happen to the Inflation Reduction Act with Trump if he does come in. And on market, one thing I would say, if Labour do come in, I think we'll start to see hopefully a better relationship with Europe, which means that potentially that trade market will get better again, because the one thing that really hinders us selling abroad at the moment to our closest allies is the tax on the imported. I think the UK could actually become much better in that regard from a market perspective. I wouldn't say don't go rushing yet.
My own company has this discussion all the time because we're not in the US. We've got offices across Europe, the Middle East, and we listen to the experiences of other portfolio companies, and it puts us off doing it. And I think the answer is, yeah, you absolutely want to go to the US when you're ready. And when you're ready is probably two things. One, when the opportunity is more attractive than any of the local opportunities in Europe, and on the whole, those are easier. And secondly, when you're ready is when your customers are going to make it easy for you to succeed there. Otherwise, the US is like saying, I'm going to China or I'm going to Europe. It's huge. And being in one market is not being in the US. I think I'm going to end it there because we've gone way over the time. I'm going to just ask them if they've got any one final plea to founders and or policy to keep in mind over the next few years. So what would you most like to see as a company, for example, or as a changing policy?
I think it's not as much change in policy as a stability of policy. So we know what the policy is, set the policy, and let people start to work towards it. And I think for companies, it doesn't matter what sector you're in. A good company and good fundamentals in your business will remain the same whatever sector you're in.
Yeah, I think on the policy front, I think echo the Kinsey piece. I think for me it would be kind of, be bold, commit, and stick to it on the policy front. Easier said than done, I appreciate. But it would make a huge difference. And from a startup-centric point of view, keep doing what you guys are doing. There's lots of really exciting innovations coming out of the UK. Make sure that you're always focused on the problem you're trying to solve, and not just the exciting technology itself.
Yeah, policy for me has to be planning. Let's sort out the planning system. And my plea to founders would be, don't sit on your own. There's plenty of help out there. There's plenty of accelerator programs, support. So don't try and do it on your own. Find friends.
What's your name and where are you from?
No, I'm Mutaz. I'm Egyptian originally.
What company though?
And I work for Anki. So, I co-founded Anki.
Yes.
So what we're doing is we're trying to solve Amazon's problem when it comes to handling returns, essentially. They get a huge volume of returns coming through, and you don't know how to handle it properly. They've tried a few shortcuts, but none of them are really sustainable long-term solutions. And what we've done is we've built a system to essentially go through each return in a fast and scalable manner, figuring out what's wrong with each item, and then reselling it by putting it back into the economy.
So what are you waiting for the election? Are you thinking about staying here, or you're thinking about going to the US?
No, so I'm actually a naturalized British citizen, so I'm stuck here for now. No, I mean I like it. I think in the UK or in Europe in general, people are more receptive to sustainability and environment. And they did mention a point about Trump. I think his odds are becoming higher and higher now. So it's we might move to the US, and the next thing you know, Trump is president, and then he's like, no, I'm oil is king, and anything else is a scam, right? So it's I think the UK is good. You get access to talent, immense talent. You get a massive support network, as one of the panelists mentioned. So I think it's a good place to be. Definitely, I wouldn't. If you want to move to the US to get higher valuations, possibly. I think Americans in general are hyper consumerists in a sense, so they do return a lot more than British or Europeans. So there is a bigger market for returns there. So obviously it's on our radar, but for now I think the UK is more compatible.
Well, Mutaz, thank you so much for talking to us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Have a good Climate Week.
Thank you. Cheers.
Sarah McIntosh, CEO of CleanTech UK. Thanks for joining us. What do you think of this London Climate Week so far?
I think it's full of energy. I think people are really anticipating the election coming, and it just feels like people are excited. They're excited for change. They're excited for a really positive new post-election reinvigoration of climate.
Well, thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your Climate Week.
The problem is that pumped hydro cannot scale at a sufficient pace. Sites are too limited, and projects take decades to consent and construct. It's not a solution that can scale to meet the challenges of the climate emergence. Traditional pumped hydro requires mountains has incredibly long build times, and there are just not enough sites. The re-energised solution is called high density hydro. It is to build upon this mature solution and make it better. In fact, 2.5 times better. Instead of using water, we introduce a fluid that is environmentally benign and high density.
Great presentation again today. It looked like you had a lot of interest. Had to wait to talk to you to be able to say hi. Lots of people coming over. So what's the interest been like as through the day so far?
Really good. I mean, it's been less intense than others that we've been to, but it's been a good, steady flow. We always find that. We always find after events that there's a lot of conversations we need to follow up on. This event has been, I would say, quite UK with a little bit of US. Other events we've been to have been sort of more geographically spread in terms of the people we follow up with. But, it's been good. And you never know until it's over, and you start following up, but it feels like you've got a steady trickle, steady flow, excuse the pun, of steady flow of high-density inquiries.
Very good. Well, listen, Stephen Crozier, CEO of Re-Energize, thank you so much, and good luck with the rest of the Climate Week. At the very end, we'll come back to the Excel to hear a little bit of an unusual way that they ended the evening yesterday. Now let's have my conversation with Peter Sainsbury. Unusually, I spoke to him from a churchyard, St. Anne's, in Soho, which was the quietest place I could find to be able to record this on Monday. Peter Sainsbury, founder of Carbon Risk. Welcome to Wicked Problems.
Thanks very much, Richard. Yeah, thanks for the invite to come on your podcast.
We're delighted to have you. We're fans of the newsletter, been following your work for really quite some time, but we were struck by something that you had actually written about the recent elections and potential for green backlash in the EU. But before we do that, first tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to set up Carbon Risk.
Yeah, that's right. I started it up probably about 2.5 years ago now. Prior to that, I worked as an economist at an environmental NGO for several years. In many ways, it was kind of the perfect job. But the thing that I kept really enjoyed was writing about economics, markets, climate as well. And many jobs, don't always allow you to do what you really enjoy doing. So I had the opportunity and motivation to kind of leave my job and pursue a career in writing for myself for a living, and not with any particular idea of what that might involve. But I've been struck by the opportunity and the benefits of carbon markets, and using markets to improve outcomes for the environment and society as a whole. And so, after a while, I thought, let's focus on carbon markets and see how that goes. I've been writing a book, and I thought that's going to take a couple of years to get out into the public domain. And by then, it will be, it might be out of date. Not quite sure whether it's going to have the impact I really want. So I started a newsletter on Substack called Carbon Risk, and publishing 2 to 3 articles a week over the last 2.5 years. It's grown massively. So I've had really lots of positive feedback, and eager to keep on writing.
Well, it's certainly one of our go-to resources to better understand different aspects of carbon markets, and I know for many of our listeners and viewers as well. So let's talk a little bit about the recent European elections and whether they signal or not this kind of backlash. We're here in the UK, we're undergoing a political campaign here, but whether there is a nascent backlash brewing against EU policies, against the Green New Deal, the government here U-turning against its own policies for the last few years, which seems to have left a lot of investors, a lot of market observers very confused about the lack of policy certainty going forward. But you said something interesting about the fact that investors might have already priced in some of this. So maybe tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily new that there was going to be this kind of backlash to climate policies. If you look back to 2019, it was in many ways an ideal Goldilocks period for climate policy. In many ways, we had low energy prices. There was a big amount of voter support for climate policies. You saw that in Germany and when there was German elections in late 2019, and in the European elections in Europe. Yeah, and so there was lots of support. But of course, we've had COVID, war in Ukraine, high energy prices, lots of other issues, as well as a general move to more far right political views, anti-migration and other factors. But what I found interesting was the a few years ago, the investment bank Societe Generale had constructed an index to look at I think it's the 50 companies across Europe that would benefit the most from the EU Green Deal. And to put that into context, that was kind of like the flagship policy of Europe at the time, and still is. The main component of that policy was the Fit for 55 package, which struck into law the target of cutting emissions by at least 53% by 2030. So really, really ambitious targets. And what SG did was to put together an index of those companies that would benefit the most from that package. The amount of money that was going to be funneled in from governments across Europe, and the private sector leverage that would bring as well. And it's fair to say that in that kind of 2019-2020 period, there was this kind of surge in the valuations of those companies, relative to the European, kind of a broader European index of share prices. But then it really just kind of topped out in sort of early 2021. And since then we've seen this kind of sort of gradual stabilization versus the European average. And then really it's really been in the last year that the share prices have really underperformed versus the rest of Europe. So I thought that was quite interesting, really, that financial markets are always clearly forward-looking, trying to understand how different macroeconomic, financial, and of course political changes will affect the future for the companies that they invest in. And so what we've seen in the last sort of few weeks, I think in the lead up to the European elections, there was a slight recovery in that index, as I think investors were kind of thinking the far right wasn't going to be quite such a big impact. And then when the election results came out, the market did fall back, but it's only really fallen back to where it was perhaps a month ago. And then in the last 1 or 2 weeks, we've seen this kind of stabilization in the valuation of those companies.
Could you give me an idea of what the kind of component companies in the index, just to give people an indication of what SocGen thought were the kind of sectors or subsectors that they tipped as being most beneficial, and whether or not the thesis has changed? Yeah, that's right. So they're mainly stocks based in France and Germany. I think they together account for about 40% of the index, and it's mainly really kind of industrials and utilities. So it's companies like Tomra Systems, who do like recycling infrastructure, and other companies like, say, E.ON, Schneider Electric, ABB. So they're all very much either heavily involved with sort of renewables, or putting together the grid and electrical systems that enable the energy transition to take place. Right. I mean, if you're building power grids, if you're electrifying transport and building heat, if you're doing all these other things, then you would expect these companies to benefit some of the most. And I think your conclusion was about whether or not we've fully priced things in, or whether or not we're going to see any further backsliding. Again, this is just one index, but it's a useful one in terms of having an idea about. I'm in London today for London Climate Action Week, going around talking to people at different conferences, and whether things are investable is obviously very much top of mind, and whether or not you're going to get that return, which is what the markets are trying to price in. So what was your exit take on that, in terms of whether or not we're fully pricing things in? Yeah, so firstly, the policies that have already been put in place, that's like the EU Green Deal. And then the second thing to think about is the potential new policies, or the policies that are currently being forced about, and what level of ambition they are going to likely to see going forward. I think my conclusion really, and I think this has been echoed by other people, is that the EU Green Deal, I think there's very, very little chance of that being unpicked or
watered down in any way. I think there's just no appetite to revisit those those policies. And I think that's reflected in the index, that the Green Deal index of 50 companies, in that there hasn't really been investors haven't been scared by the election results. Where I do think potentially there is an impact going forward is the level of ambition. And so we've got the next 1 or 2 years, there's going to be negotiations on the 2040 target. Several months ago, there was indications of kind of 90% reductions in emissions, to set the stage towards net zero by 2050. I think there's going to be interesting things around the EU ETS2, which looks at transport and heating across Europe. There's potential for that to be affected going forward. So I think that's probably in terms of the two sort of buckets of policies going forward that that investors and policymakers need to be thinking of.
We've had Kieran Cuff, MEP, former MEP, on the show earlier this year, who I met first when he was a kind of brash Dublin city councillor from the Green Party, and then really matured into this real deal maker in Brussels, of somebody who really, the Energy Performance for Buildings Directive through the whole process and final negotiations and finally getting through in April. And his reward was to lose his seat a few weeks later. So having pushed through one of these major pieces of legislation, he's an architect by training, so really looking at retrofit of buildings, really thinking about building heat, and became a real policy expert in the area and helped shepherd this thing through. And his reward was to get booted out. So you can see why the incentives, if you are a policymaker, why that can be a bit tricky.
There's elections obviously in the UK as well, and clearly you see members of Parliament, at least in the narrative that they spell out to their constituents, whether in the media or otherwise, the net zero policies. If we can just water them down, that'll help reduce your bills. Won't be so much impact on your lives. So it's a familiar narrative there that it's hard to know what would happen necessarily when they get back into power.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I think also the media environment, is you can already see the strains, kind of being built up, in the usual suspects of kind of media, who are, trying to find every chip in every, kind of hole in any policy that, you can imagine the next government putting forward, whether it be on, Great British Energy, or whether it be what's the future of the oil industry in Aberdeen, or, what are you going to do with all those people in the jobs? Or, I was talking to someone this morning, I can't say who, who was one of the architects of the ULEZ policy, who basically was, looking at this and like the mayor of London obviously, went against a lot of this trend by increasing his majority, despite, his opponent going after him on ULEZ very, very hard, particularly the outer kind of boroughs. But I suppose it's going to take a lot of fortitude, I suppose, for the policy to maintain policy certainty. Even in a place like New York, we just saw the Democratic governor of New York, veto a congestion charge for New York City that she actually helped campaign for, and leaving a lot of people scratching their heads about why on earth, if we can't even count on that policy in that state, then how on earth are we going to be able to plan for the future in these types of other types of harder types of decisions. I don't know if you saw this. Again, we didn't talk about it before, but this just happened this morning. Christina Figueres and a bunch of other folks from the We Mean Business Coalition launched what they're calling Mission 2025, in the run-up to the NDCs being determined, for in that point, trying to kind of double down on trying to get governments to provide this policy certainty. So that she's put out a letter this morning with a few hundred organizations, cities, large corporations, regional governments, all saying, the level of ambition needs to be stable and kind of keep going in order to, in part, provide that policy certainty. But also that if we, fail to keep up, the ambition, that the target, forget about 1.5, although they want climate policies, policies to still be aligned for 1.5, but that becomes vanishingly in the rearview mirror. Now you're really talking about is 2 feasible, as we go up from there. And I suppose there's at least a recognition that the level of ambition is going to come under a lot of pressure. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or if you've seen that so far, but it's an interesting initiative, and that it's fact it's needed is interesting.
Yeah, no, I hadn't seen that news this morning, but it's whether it's reflected in the price of equities that are exposed to climate policies, or what the thing I kind of talk about a lot about on carbon risk is how political commitments are reflected in the price of carbon. Either the EU carbon price, or here in the UK, or elsewhere abroad. And it's clear from historically and today, if you kind of analyse the level of sort of political commitment, that whether it's investment or the price of carbon, they're all built on trust. And as soon as trust wavers, or investors and participants have reason to doubt the degree of the commitment made by policymakers, then the price of carbon will go down, it will weaken, and that makes it much more difficult to leverage the investment to for decarbonisation. So going back to our previous point, I think members of parliament see watering down commitments as that helped me get re-elected, but it's a very short-termist attitude, because it clearly has a lasting long-term impact on confidence in investment.
And again, like you mentioned, we are in the throes of election season here in the UK. I'm not even going to talk about the other election in the States, because it just makes me sad and depressed to start thinking about that. But in terms of what seems almost very likely at this moment is that Labour will come in with a substantial majority. How do you think the policies that they've signalled that they will go ahead with might affect the carbon price? In fact, the emission trading scheme here in the UK.
Yeah, that's right. When the UK left Europe, it launched its own UK emissions trading scheme shortly afterwards, and for about 12 to 18 months after that, it operated at a kind of a sort of 10% premium to the EU carbon price. But then, of course, when it was roughly around the time that Liz Truss became Prime Minister, everything went south, including the UK carbon price. And things kind of really hit the bottom of the barrel when I think Prime Minister Sunak announced back in, I think it was September last year, that he was abandoning all these net zero policies, or at least delaying them. That's when confidence really hit rock bottom. And so back then, the UK carbon price was roughly about 50% discount to the EU carbon price. But since then, as expectations have grown that Labour is going to come into power, that discount's narrowed to about 15%, I think, last week. So I think there's an expectation, at least, that Labour will be clearly much more pro-climate policies, much more likely to be aligned and have a deeper conversation with its partners across Europe. I think one thing that I think a lot of industries in the UK are really actually seeking now is for the UK to link with the EU carbon price, because the low carbon price is affecting investment. When the EU introduces its carbon border adjustment mechanism in a couple of years' time, that's going to negatively affect companies here in the UK. So there's a lot of kind of economic and political might that I think is going to push the UK to establish the link. So, and I think that's what the market's signalling at the moment.
I mean, one thing I heard floated this morning is that obviously the Labour has ruled out raising personal income tax or VAT or in terms of national insurance contributions, but they haven't ruled out going for something more aggressive in terms of raising revenue on a carbon tax. What would that do? I mean, even if they start talking about this, what would that do to the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good rationale for doing something like that. I mean, for context, the UK emissions trading scheme, but it's got an additional top-up carbon tax on the power generation sector as well already at the moment. It was frozen, I think, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, so it would have been quite a bit higher if it had been carried on at the rate of inflation. I think if the UK did try and establish an additional tax, perhaps on kind of road transport fuels, that would be clearly be a big benefit in terms of leveraging additional investment into electric vehicles and that infrastructure here in the UK. I think it's probably just a bit too early just to know where things are at the moment. It's surprising in many ways that climate just hasn't been on the political agenda during this election campaign. It's barely been mentioned, despite being one of those kind of sort of prickly issues that will, get people talking. We've had Labour's manifesto, which certainly gives some good signs, but hopefully, once they're in power, they are actually quite ambitious in terms of what they're trying to achieve.
Well, I suppose in the classic journalistic hedge, we will wait and see.
Thank you very much for inviting me on the podcast.
We'll, of course, put a link in the show notes for Carbon Risk. If you haven't subscribed already, shame on you. If you have not subscribed already, shame on you. But if you haven't, fix it. Go make it happen. Anything else you look out coming? Anything big features, any big pieces you'll be putting out sometime soon that we should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I've been writing quite a bit about carbon dioxide removal markets. So, at the moment, it's very much private sector companies, like Microsoft and other tech companies that are investing in this field. But as we move towards meeting these net zero targets, there's clearly going to need to be much more investment and much more policy support, whether that's being included in the emissions trading scheme or some other way to kind of really scale up these technologies. So watch out for those.
We will look out for that, and I suppose, it'd be interesting to get your take on running tide, but I suppose that we'll save that for a different conversation. Obviously, they were the first big name in carbon removals to hit the wall. We did an episode on that last week, but I think it's I'm talking to a lot of people in the sector, and they're all looking at it quite nervously. But I suppose, because where the off-takers are going to be, where the customers are actually going to be, where the revenue is going to come from is still a very open question. But we'll leave it there. Peter Sainsbury, founder of Carbon Risk, thanks for coming on Wicked Problems.
Cool. Thanks, Richard.
And I've always wanted to do this, so I'm going to do this now. And signing off, live from St. Inns here in London, I'm Richard Delavan. Or something like that. I probably won't use that, it's ridiculous. Anyway, Peter, thank you so much for coming on, man.
No worries.
And finally, because no big event is complete without making sure there's a good drinks due at the end, we did stick around for a little bit of that before making our excuses and leaving. But also we get a chance to talk to Kenneth Lair, Economic Development Board of Singapore, who had the unenviable task of speaking to this crowd of folks after a brass band had walked them in to be able to talk to them about the virtues of Singapore. So we caught up with him very briefly. And a bit of an evaluation of day one from Duncan Reid, the founder and CEO of Reset Connect, so perhaps not the most objective source, but we got his take. And then you'll hear us play out the noise, sound of that brass band. Enjoy your Climate Week.
Without further ado, thank you very much for giving me your attention. I hope this gives you a better understanding of what Singapore's sustainability ambitions are and how we're working with companies to accelerate their net zero journeys. We really welcome companies to set up and to share your technologies with us. We will be at the site. Enjoy your evening and football afternoon. Thank you very much.
Loved your presentation.
Thank you.
Tough gig.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about it?
Oh, good. I mean, it's always good to share in a one-to-many setting, and hopefully there are, people who take home message.
I'm not going to keep you long. What is your main message you want climate tech companies here in the UK to hear that you want to deliver tonight?
Yeah. We might be a small country, but we have huge ambitions in Southeast Asia. As you can see, we have many firsts. First country to approve sale of lab-grown meat. First country to implement a carbon price in Southeast Asia. So we're keen to really work with companies with the latest technologies, and be it in carbon services or in decarbonization. So feel free, we're happy to always have a chat to see how Singapore can be part of their growth plans.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you.
How the day's gone so far?
Is it recording?
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's actually the microphone.
Yeah.
Oh, it is a microphone, yeah. I think the day's been absolutely fantastic. There were queues of people wanting to get in at 7:30 this morning. All the stands have been absolutely packed. We're here at the networking now, and there's still, great crowds. So I think it's been. I mean, as the guy who set the show up 3 years ago, it's been great seeing this event grow, and just seeing the amount of companies that are here now. How many startups and scale-ups are here? There have been people dropping ticket sizes all day for various sorts of conversations. So, I think that the climate tech sector looks really good if this is a sort of representation of it. So, pleased with that's gone.
Well, congratulations again, Duncan. So thanks for talking to us, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
If you liked this conversation, please share it and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really helps people find the show. If you'd like an ad-free version of this podcast, consider becoming a paid subscriber at wickedproblems.earth. You'll also get our newsletter, all our show notes, member-only goodies, and you'll be supporting media that wants to tell the stories at the frontier of climate tech, a place where people and politics, technology and capital meet and shape the future. And whether it's one you'd want to live in. Wicked Problems is written and edited by Richard Delavan. Production assistance was provided by me, Theodore Delavan. Wicked Problems, Climate Tech Conversations, is a production of Wicked Problems Limited. Thanks again for listening.